10 months ago, I said I haven't decided where to pick a hill to die on, and in this video, I'm going to pick that hill. I just want to make this statement right now. The reason why I'm making this video is because the union is not clear exactly what they want with bullet points, crystal clear to anyone reading. Instead, they're hiding a lot of it behind charters and memorandums of understanding and so on and so forth. That's not openly available to the drivers, and they're not giving the crystal clear bullet points. They're saying fancy ideas of what they think would be good for us to hear. Hey guys, it's Chris, and I'm just here to have a casual chat today. Just having a scotch while I go through this one. It's a Wednesday. This is my wind down night, and people might say, well, why a Wednesday, Chris? And I'm like, well, Wednesday night for a wind down night for me. One, midweek hub, and two, I work most weekends. I'm out delivery driving at night time, so I don't really get that downtime. So I pick somewhere in the middle of the week where it's not going to be as busy and I can kind of min-max my opportunities. But today I just want to have a chat about, look, it's been bugging me for a while now. About 10 months ago, I filmed a video saying the union is coming. And it was about reviewing across the charter that the union, Transport Workers Union in Australia, and the gig delivery companies, the gig companies like Uber, back then Deliveroo as well, even though they walked away and left Australia, DoorDash and all the other guys are impacted and involved to this. They created a charter where they were going to try come to an agreement and understanding about how gig delivery driving or rideshare as well, for people doing passengers, should look and work in Australia. And it's been 10 months since, and there's been a lot of change in this space. And in this video today, I just want to have a chat with you guys and run through where my head's at with this. 10 months ago, I said I haven't decided where to pick a hill to die on. And in this video, I'm going to pick that hill. Now guys, I just need to make this crystal clear. I am not paid by any of the gig delivery companies to make this video. This is not a sponsored video at all. This is me talking to you guys directly about my observations over the last probably 14 months, watching this union movement and then what's happening with the gig delivery companies and how it impacts us directly. Recently in Australia, the Transport Workers Union and affiliated campaign marketers for them, such as the Rideshare Network, have been pushing out a lot of propaganda saying, you know, drivers need to get all this money and need to have rights as an employee and be an employee and get paid X, Y, and Z and get awards rates and overtimes and penalties and super and so on and so forth. And from the outlook, sure, that's great. That's fantastic. Let's get the best perks, benefits, and pay that we can. There's a small little problem with this. They are pushing for us to be employees of these companies. Imagine being an employee. So I want as much money as possible for the drivers and to retain rights as a contractor. That's my stance, that's where I'm at. So in this video, I'm not going to talk about how great it is to be an employee. I'm going to talk about the problems it's going to cause you changing from being a contractor to an employee. So these are the things that all these marketing campaigns from the unions and their marketing legs aren't telling you, because they don't want you to know this. First things first, pay G. So if you're an employee, you're going to be getting pay G. So that's where the company is paying you and withholding your tax on your behalf. You don't want that. Oh mate, well I've got to pay tax anyway, so why don't I want that? You tell me. So let's call it that you are earning $30 per hour right now. Now that $30, you receive that across to your bank account when you get paid each week from the gig delivery companies. From that $30 that you receive, no tax has been withheld at all, so it's not pay G. Then from that $30, you'd pull out your money for your fuel that you spent and any other ancillary costs around it. And so your expenses to run your business essentially as a contractor, you deduct out, then the money remaining is your taxable income. So from that taxable income left over, that's where you can put a little bit aside for tax. Now, if we switch across to the pay G model, what they're going to do is going to withhold that tax chunk from the $30. So not after your deductions, but from the total gross earned. They're going to withhold that. So say if you're on a 32% bracket right now, you know, $30, call it just over $10, immediately disappears. So that money you cannot touch. You cannot use it for your expenses to run your business. It leaves you $20 now. So something out of $30 to spend for, you know, running your business, your operating costs, you're now down to $20 to spend for your operating costs, as opposed to so you're being overtaxed. So they're taking too much from tax from you at that point because they don't know what your expenditure is. This is going to put every single driver at a disadvantage, and it's going to reduce their run rates per week as a driver. Like, they don't have the extra money to spend and then declare their taxes after their expenses. Instead, they're being taxed on the full amount, and then whatever's left, they start to do their expenses. Then hopefully back at the end of the year, say if this is like August, and you're doing this, in August, you are getting money withheld that you need to run your business, and then 11 months down the track, next tax season, you can declaim it and you get a little bit back, which helps you rerun the business again. So no, you're being overtaxed at that point where you should have that money, free capital, to run your business today. So the second point I want to touch base on is rostering. So if we become employees, we need a roster. And a roster means we need to work a set amount of hours. So if you have like if you work 1 hour, you can't just log out of the app and say, no, I'm done. No, you got to meet your rostered shift. As an employee, you must work that amount of hours that you're scheduled on for. And rostering is probably the biggest thing we should be scared shitless of. And I'll tell you why. It's because currently, DoorDash, Uber Eats, all the gig delivery companies, all the rideshare companies, all the passenger ones, so on and so forth, they do not need to pay drivers for downtime. So when they're in between orders or in between fares, there's no payment for downtime. But as a driver, you think, oh, wouldn't it be great if we did get paid for that though? And getting paid for the wait times at restaurants, oh, wouldn't that be fantastic? Now, these companies' business models are based around order for fare, so contracting out the job and not paying for the downtime in between. So they can let a lot of drivers log in and schedule, knowing that some of them will be waiting around for orders. Now, if we change it across to rostering, where they need to pay for that downtime, do you think they can afford to have all these drivers logged in at once? So currently, both Uber Eats and DoorDash have an open schedule. So for Uber Eats, you can hit log on at any point you want, and they can have as many drivers on as they have in their roster. Same with DoorDash, there's only 30-minute scheduling slots, but you can log in 15 minutes before your schedule. So the worst case scenario, you have a 15-minute wait before you can log on. In Australia, this leads to a lot of downtime where drivers are waiting around between orders. Now, if they had to pay all this downtime, it's not feasible, it's not profitable for them, it's a bad business move for them. So to mitigate that risk of just money being wasted and burnt from drivers sitting around, they need to restrict the schedules down. Instead of maybe having 20, 30, 40 drivers logged into an area at a time, because they need to pay the downtime now, they might restrict that back down to 8 to 10. Suddenly you've got a filled roster, and if the roster's full, then you can't log in because it's booked out. For those who've been doing this for a little while, you'd remember back to the days where you'd have to schedule in for shifts in Australia, and then there was only so many spots available, and then you couldn't log in or schedule, unless you're a top dasher. But we're not all going to be top dashers. So this will lead to only X amount of hours available per zone per week, which means instead of everyone being able to have the opportunity or the shot to pick up a little bit of extra work on the side, it's going to turn around to people being restricted and locked out. Now, how do you handle a surplus of drivers? So there's two ways, and the first way is the company just saying, well, let them just fight over their shifts, let them fight over their scheduling, let them figure it all out, and it'll all come together, but we meet our scheduling needs. And the second way is, and I really hope it doesn't pan out this way, is bulk terminations. If employee clauses come through saying the employer must give them at least 3 hours per week or 3 hours per fortnight, or whatever the laws and legislations may be per state, then suddenly that's a problem. One, you've lost your flexibility. Two, you've got more drivers on that you can give a minimum of 3 hours to. The question comes down to who gets terminated, and that's a very difficult thing to answer. Do you terminate your casual workforce? Oh, surely the full-timers will be right. Maybe you look at acceptance rates, then cut off people under a certain threshold. Talking about full-timers, I just want to touch base now on people doing it full-time or doing bulk hours, so more than 40 hours per week. Some of you guys doing like 80 hours per week. Now, if you move across into an employee model, the employee model has awards rates, and the awards rates have overtime and penalty rates that apply after you do X amount of hours. You might be sitting there and you're like, yeah, cool, awesome. So if I do 12 hours in a day, I'm getting paid overtime for that. Wrong. These companies are so cost efficient. Why the heck do you think they're going to allow you to work more than the maximum amount of hours before penalty rates kick in? They're going to put restrictions on the shifts, guys. They're going to say you can only work X amount of hours before having X amount of break to make sure that they don't pay you overtime. Now, when we look at maximum hours per week, they're going to put that cap in there as well. They don't want to pay overtime. So if you hit the maximum amount of hours before overtime is eligible, they're going to cut you off and say you can't log in until next week. They're not going to allow you to do overtime. Let's take the driver hat off for a second, then put the company hat on. So if I was the company and I've got thousands and thousands and thousands of people willing to work at any given hour, why would I allow overtime, especially now that it's been restricted in and people are fighting for shifts? No, I'm not going to allow overtime. I'm going to allow them to log in, fill out the maximum amount of hours that they can, but because there's such demand of people fighting over hours at this point, you know, you'll be lucky to get full-time hours anymore, because so many people are scrambling to fill out that 40 hours a week. This, in my opinion, will lead to tens of thousands of drivers impacted, not being able to do the hours that they want on the days and times that they want to work. Even full-time workers, you guys might turn around and go, crap, after these changes, I can no longer get enough scheduling for full-time hours anymore. I can only get 25 hours per week booked in. And I'm trying to schedule ahead, but everyone's fighting for the schedules. I cannot do full-time anymore. And here's the thing, guys, and this is where the union is coming at you from. They're not letting you know that you may be that person impacted where you used to work full-time, you can no longer get these full-time hours. These are the oversights and the risks they're not discussing around with the community. There is a very small percentage of people very vocal about these things, and they're thinking in the back of their head themselves, well, I'll be able to get full-time hours and I can get all these benefits and I can do all these things. But the thing is, it's not going to happen for them. They're in the same frying pan as everyone else, and they're the ones causing the heat. So superannuation is over 10%. Those overseas watching, superannuation is a chunk of money that the companies need to pay across to employees, not contractors, employees, that goes into a long-term savings account with, you know, kind of like hedge funds, if you look at it that way. We call them super funds over here, and we can only access that money once we hit a preservation age for retirement. Before that, we can't touch that money. So if we can imagine as a company, they have X amount of budget available for paying drivers right now. Now, if it turns across into salaried work and their employees, then a chunk, just over 10%, is going to get pulled out for superannuation. Now, this is not money added on top. This is money, essentially, that is taken out of the available pool. Now, as contractors, that superannuation chunk is not being taken out right now. That is still available in the budget pool. I've made this clear myself in other places, and my stance is that as a contractor, I do not want to pay superannuation. I do not want to be forced to pay superannuation. I'd rather just invest the money myself. So losing a chunk of my potential income forced across into some super fund, I don't want that. I want to control my money from start to finish, and as well, I want to be able to turn around and use that money for superannuation. I want to be able to use that money for my operating costs today on my vehicle. So to rein this in on a high level, the union wants to make you an employee right now, not a contractor, not an independent contractor, not your own boss, an employee of these gig companies. Now, if you become an employee of these gig companies, a common practice is non-competes. If you sign up to Uber Eats, they can have a non-compete saying you cannot work for competitors in Australia, which means you can't run for DoorDash, you can't run for any other companies at the same time. This doesn't mean multi-apping, guys. These are non-compete employment contracts. So you cannot work for the other companies at all. If you're being paid $30 per hour from Uber Eats and $30 per hour from DoorDash because the union's wanting you're an employee, they can't both be paying you at the same time as you're logged in waiting for orders to come in. Doesn't work that way, guys. It'd be a good hack, but it doesn't work that way. They're gonna have non-competes written into your contract, and you'll be terminated if you're detected using multiple applications. So the gig companies are running campaigns right now. Uber's got one called Flexibility Works that they're pumping out in emails to all their drivers. Now, the reason why they're doing this is because they're trying to get driver support saying that we want to be flexible, we want to be contractors. They're trying to get the numbers and the feedback to fight the union on the union saying we want people to be employees. So if you want to be a contractor and not be an employee, you need to fill out these emails, reply to these surveys, because the gig companies, they're fighting the union right now. They are fighting for you to have flexibility. They're fighting for you not to be an employee. And as well, to their own self-interest, they're fighting to keep operating in Australia, because If this moves across and they need to pay all these drivers the amount of salary for their downtime between orders, say if they don't cut off schedules or anything like that, they'll be bust in 3 months in Australia and they'll pull all operations, uproot and leave, just like Deliveroo did. Guys, why do you think Deliveroo left Australia? Do you think it's just because it was poor performers and too much competition? No, they were losing fights with the union and legislation, and they saw it was coming. They said, you know what? It's not worth it anymore. And all these other companies can just do the same thing. They're not Australian companies. They're going to turn around, uproot and fuck off. So if you want to keep your opportunity, you need to reply to these surveys and say why. Now, of course, if you want to be a full-time employee, you can reply back to these surveys and say, I would like to be an employee. I would like to have salaried hours, blah, 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 X, Y, Z. Sure, say it. I'm not saying you can't do that, but I am saying that 80 to 90% of you will not be able to work the way that you currently do if we become employees. You guys earning $2,000 plus per week, you're not going to be able to do that anymore. You're going to be locked down to a salaried wage of 40 hours. You might be able to earn $1,500, $1,600, just depending what the award rate is at the time. So you will not be able to extra mile to make that extra $500, $600, $800, $1,000, whatever it might be. However strong and hard you're going in your zone, you won't be able to do that anymore. You'll be locked to 40 hours of work. So I want as many Australians as possible to have the opportunity to make extra money, especially in these difficult economic times. I don't want restrictions in. I don't want people not being able to log in. I don't want the majority of people fighting over just a very small fraction of shifts. Even back when it was scheduled, say for DoorDash, there was a lot of people could log in, but there was like a finite point to that scheduling. If we move across to salaried, the finite point is going to shift right in close. They cannot afford to pay all the downtime. So it's going to knock a lot of Australians out of potential earning opportunities. I do want Australians to earn as much money as possible, of course, while they're doing this, but I don't want people excluded. And I don't want people terminated and fired. Now, the fight between the companies and the union is really going to start to fire up over the next couple of months because it's coming to crunch time. They need to decide, are people going to be contractors or employees? Guys, leave down below in the comments what you think about it all. I know where I stand. I want to be a contractor and I want to earn as much money as possible. And I want the flexibility to just be able to log in whenever I want to log in and work. Outside of the gig companies, there's not too much stuff opposing the union right now. And in fact, they've got a free run on the press. And there's a lot of politicians who used to be people running the union that moved into politics afterwards. And they're saying, yep, cool, push union propaganda everywhere. So there's no opposition against it. Unfortunately, I'm a very small voice in the sea of everything. Just saying, you know, playing devil's advocate, just saying, hey, there's other things that you guys aren't being shown right now. So just factor it, make your own decisions, what works for you. Pick your side you want to be on. Unfortunately, there will be arguments and fights about this. Whichever way it pans out, I'm going to learn to adapt and move forward with it. But I like the way it works right now.